yelled at me. We're going to get started in about 1 minute, folks. Please take your seats. If you'd like to have a conversation, just please exit the auditorium. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight. It being 7:30 on Tuesday, December 20th, 2022, let's begin our Town Council meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence for all of those who serve in our military here and abroad and for their families. I'd also like to offer a moment of silence for Bob Brinkman, who was our town assessor for many, many years, and sadly, Bob passed away on December 17th. We are thinking of him and his family and sending them moments of peace. Thank you. You may be seated. Clerk Semino, may we please have a roll call?
Councillor Baraka.
Here.
Councillor Flaherty.
Here.
Councillor Hume.
Here.
Councillor Mackin.
Here.
Councillor Maglio.
Here.
Councillor O'Brien.
Present.
Councillor Reynolds.
Here.
Councillor Ringus.
Here.
Councillor Ryan. All present.
Thank you, Clerk Semino. We do have a member who is participating remotely this evening. Councillor O'Brien is on the phone. Therefore, all votes will be by roll call tonight. Right, I would like to offer, are there any announcements from councilors this time? Okay, seeing none, I will offer this as our final council meeting of the year. So wishing everyone a very happy holiday season and a joyful new year. So with that, we will move on to our approval of minutes for October 18th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Councilors Ryan and Hume. Clerk Semino, roll call vote for the minutes.
Councillor Baraka.
Yes.
Councillor Flaherty.
Aye.
Councillor Hume.
Aye.
Councillor Mackin.
Aye.
Councillor Maglio.
Aye.
Councillor O'Brien.
Aye.
Councillor Reynolds.
Aye.
Councillor Ringus.
Aye.
Councillor Ryan.
Aye.
That's 9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to take a moment to recognize and thank our department heads who are in attendance this evening, along with Mayor Kokoros and his Chief of Staff, Nicole Taub. We also have Director of Finance, Ed Spellman here, Chief of Police, Mark DuBois, and I also see our Deputy Chiefs in attendance, Mike Want and Tim Cahoon. So again, if I missed anyone, I'm sorry, but thank you all for being here this evening. All right, we will move on now to our old business, 22070, Mayor. Appointment of the Braintree Local Cultural Council, Heidi Hurley, or take up any action relative thereto. I will refer to Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Councilor Reynolds, for your recommendation.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening, the Ways and Means Committee voted 3-0 for recommended approval of that motion.
Thank you very much. Does anyone from the Mayor's office wish to speak?
Good evening, Madam President, members of the council, Clerk Semino, nice to see everybody. For folks that don't know, the Braintree Cultural Council is part of a larger or statewide cultural council, and it's comprised of people who either live or work in our community and have some kind of experience or love of the arts and or humanities. They work on grant proposals and secure funding to be used for programming that will educate, entertain, or enrich the lives of the Braintree community. Before you this evening are two appointment requests to the Cultural Council. The first is someone who is no stranger to the community of Braintree after serving for many years as a teacher in our public school system, but also very much an active participant in the community arts, and that is Ms. Heidi Hurley. Ms. Hurley is not able to be with us this evening, but she did ask me to share that she's incredibly excited to continue her involvement on this committee, and thanks you in advance for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chief of Staff Taub. Anyone from the council wish to speak? Okay, I will just offer, I did have the pleasure of attending the December meeting of the Cultural Council. They were working through grant applications that had been submitted, and it was a delight to meet Ms. Hurley and Ms. Conley there, and I think they'll both make great additions to helping promote the arts and culture in our community. So thanks to them both for their willingness to serve, and I'm really looking forward to the programs this year. So with that, do we have a motion for 22070?
Motion to approve the mayor's appointment to the Braintree Local Cultural Council, LCC, Heidi Hurley, or take up any action related thereto.
Is there a second? Second. Thank you, Councilors Ryan and Hume. Clerk Semino, roll call vote, please.
Counselor Barrica?
Yes.
Counselor Flaherty? Yes. Counselor Hume?
Aye.
Counselor Mackin? Aye. Counselor Maglio? Aye. Counselor O'Brien?
Aye.
Counselor Reynolds?
Aye.
Counselor Ringus? Aye. Counselor Ryan?
Aye.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to Ms. Hurley. Moving on to 22071, Mayor Appointment, Braintree Local Cultural Council for Jean Conley, or take up any action relative thereto.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
I apologize. Councilor Reynolds, the Chair of the Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you, Madam.
For your
Thank you, Madam
recommendation.
President. The Ways and Means Committee voted unanimously 3-0 this evening to recommend approval on Council Order 22071.
Thank you very much, Chairman Reynolds. Did you have any further statement, Chief of Staff Taub?
Just again to reiterate, Ms. Conley is really excited and looking forward to continuing her involvement with the Cultural Council. As a Braintree resident, I think she has a lot to contribute to the organization and look forward to kind of seeing what she brings to the council moving forward, and would respectfully request your support for the appointment.
Thank you very much. Agreed. With that, any councilors wish to speak on this? All right, is there a motion?
Motion 22071, mayor appointment, Braintree Local Cultural Council, LCC, Jean Conley, or take up any action related thereto. So moved.
Second. Thank you, Councilors Ryan and Hume. Clerk Semino, roll call vote, please.
Counselor Barrica?
Yes.
Counselor Flaherty? Aye. Counselor Hume?
Aye.
Counselor Mackin? Aye. Counselor Maglio? Aye. Counselor O'Brien?
Aye.
Counselor Reynolds?
Aye.
Counselor Ringus?
Aye.
Counselor Ryan?
Aye.
9 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and congratulations to Ms. Conley as well. All right, before we move on to our next item on the agenda, I know we have a lot of people in attendance here this evening, so I just wanted to provide the order of operations, so to speak, so everybody knows the process. So first, we are going to hear from, I'm going to ask for the chair of the Committee of Ways and Means for their recommendation. Next, we will hear from the mayor's office. After that, we do have two folks who, per the council rules, submitted prepared statements prior to tonight's meeting, which they would like to read into the record, and I'm happy to have them do that. I will invite them to the podium each individually to read their statements. Then the chief of police will be invited to speak. After all the speakers, the councilors will have time to make comments and ask questions. As usual, all councilors will have an opportunity to speak once before anyone speaks a second time. I do kindly ask councilors to hold their questions until after all of the invited speakers make their remarks. So with that, I will move on to 22072. Mayor, Home Rule petition, retirement of Officer Ryan McHugh, or take up any action relative thereto. Councilor Reynolds, remember this time, as the chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means for your recommendation on 22065.
Thank you, Madam President. Before I get into what the vote was, I just wanted to clarify something. This evening, we had a very unorthodox way in which we conducted the Ways and Means Committee meeting. Due to the fact there are a number of people that were here this evening, that we could not accommodate that meeting in the upstairs chambers and therefore had to move it down here into Johnson Chambers. Because of that, we were cut back on a little bit of our time because that also necessitated us to be able to vacate the desks in order for BCAM to be able to set up their microphones. So we had a very truncated meeting this evening. We wanted to be able to allow, as the chair of that committee, I wanted to be able to allow others to speak, to have public comment. I had made it clear in the beginning of our Ways and Means hearing that because this was not a public hearing on the agenda of the council, that there would be no public comment.
Thank you, Chairman Reynolds.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. I apologize to the public for not being able to have the time to give all of you the opportunity to speak. My hope is that the members of this committee and the speakers who have been approved for speaking will have that opportunity. So thank you.
And your recommendation,
And the
Counselor?
recommendation, with that said, thank you. With that said, the recommendation was 1 to approve, 0 to deny, 2 to abstain.
Thank you very much. All right. Would anyone from the mayor's office wish to speak? Mayor Kokoros?
Thank you, Madam President, councilors. I rise in support of my request for the retirement of Officer McHugh. I had the pleasure and privilege of appointing Officer McHugh as a selectman many years ago and have watched him develop into a fine officer over the years until the tragic events that occurred on May 5th, 2017 at Motel 6. I would just say that remembering that night, I remember all the details of the event and finding out the information. We were celebrating a joyous occasion of the 10th anniversary of the youth center, and were suddenly called and told of the events that unfolded that night. Subsequently, we had a couple of events to show our support for those officers involved, especially Officer Delaney, who was shot. We also had a number of awards that were given to the officers involved for their heroics, one which was given by the council. And recently, just scrolling through some timeline of pictures, I happened to find those pictures. So for me personally, I had that conversation with Officer McHugh, and I feel very certain and confident that he should be retired on disability, and I'm requesting that we send this to the legislature for 100% retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, we do have two folks who have prepared statements. So when you come to the podium, I will call your name. Please state your name, address, and affiliation for the record, and then you may read your statement into the record. So first, I'd like to invite Kenneth Murphy to the podium, please. Thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. My name is Kenneth Murphy. My affiliation is I'm the Area Vice President of Area 9 for Massachusetts Coalition of Police. I represent the Braintree Police Officers Association, the Braintree Superior Officers Association, and 15 other police unions in and around the area. You need my address?
For the record, yeah.
93 Brookwood Road, Hanover,
Thank
Mass. So falsehood flies while the truth limps behind. The falsehood or misrepresentation is that the accidental disability retirement process exists for officers like Ryan McHugh. The truth is that no legislation currently exists which adequately captures or processes the particular and narrow field of officers disabled from police work by serious permanent injuries sustained from a violent and extreme attack upon them by an armed individual. The Home Rule petition is the request of a municipality for a new type of power from the state legislature, which would only affect that one community issue. This is a process afforded to communities of the Commonwealth to address local matters, and in this instance, to intervene where the state has been ineffectual in returning police officers to their families fairly and without subjecting them to unsuitable, antiquated, and potentially regressive guidelines. Therefore, we seek your support for the Home Rule petition effort for Officer Ryan McHugh stemming from the May 5th, 2017 incident. The incident, as you know, involved 5 Braintree police officers attempting to serve an abuse prevention order and an arrest warrant on a subject staying at the Motel 6. During the encounter, the suspect opened fire on the officers from his room, striking an officer in the head. The officers engaged in an exchange of gunfire with the suspect while attempting to render aid to and facilitate the evacuation of the wounded officer. Officer McHugh would employ 2 weapon systems, his handgun and his rifle, during the exchange. This brief summary does not adequately encompass the conditions, circumstances, sights, sounds, smells, memories, or emotions of the incident or the ensuing investigation, critiques, and analysis. In July of 2017, former Police Chief Paul Chastany even said, "My officers are going through hell over this," in reference to both the incident and the aftermath. To state that this is not the norm in policing or merely an extraordinary incident falls short in rationalizing the magnitude of such an event upon an officer and the community. Some may feel this type of incident can simply be expected during an officer's career, or under-evaluate the gravity, or casually appreciate the severity from the safety of a Monday morning, but it's nothing short of hell, as we've heard. The fact of the matter is Braintree, as a community, experienced a spike in violence against their police officers, with 3 shot and a canine tragically killed in an astonishingly consolidated time frame of 4 years. Sadly, when communities experience increases in violence over time, often they can become conditioned to accept or rationalize past violence as not that bad because intensity and accumulation can skew perspectives. We must act collectively to ensure that view is never tolerated. Policing, as we know, is not the military. So to engage in combat operations in a town you live in a community you grew up in, on streets you drive your family through, should never be normalized in any capacity. Going to work and witnessing a coworker being shot and then fighting for your life and those with you is extreme and should never be accepted as anything but. Officer McHugh, along with the other officers, received the Dana Distinguished Service Award, the Mascot President's Award, the Massachusetts Police Association President's Award, and the highest policing honor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the Trooper George Hanna Award, for heroism in the face of extreme danger as a result of this incident. Therefore, a standard accidental disability retirement process and pension is not appropriate. Unfortunately, Massachusetts lacks an adequate and reasonable process to return officers who have engaged in and suffered the impacts of extraordinary incidents like this to their families. Certainly, the accidental disability retirement process exists for officers injured in the line of duty, officers permanently injured by line of duty falls or car accidents, tearing of a shoulder while scuffling with a suspect, for instance, all have this well-established process. Unfortunately, officers for this small field would be subject to the same intrusive clinical process without appropriate governance for these circumstances, if not for the Home Rule petition. Without this petition, these officers, to include Officer McHugh, would be subject to broad-stroking PARAC guidelines, including a state medical evaluation with 1 or 3 doctor panel that lacks suitability and current regulation. It's a repeated process of speaking with doctors and panels he's not met, not built a rapport or trust with, and whose singular purpose is to judge and render a decision upon him, his incident, the impacts, and his disability. In recent years, Somerville, Yarmouth, Weymouth, Falmouth, and Boston, among others, have utilized the Home Rule petition to support officers from this narrow field appropriately with consistently high thresholds of implementation, including the exchange of gunfire, officers being shot, and often fatality of an officer or the suspect, which this incident meets the threshold. I ask you to support this measure and meet this home rule petition request with favorable action to spare the officer from further hell, to close the door in his law enforcement career, to facilitate productive movement forward in his life, and to provide the greatest level of assistance available to he and his family. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murphy. Next, I'd like to invite, is Mario Oliveira here? Thank you, Mr. Oliveira. Come right up to the podium. Please state your name, address, and affiliation for the record. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the council, members of the community of Braintree. My name is Mario Oliveira. My address is 101 Balsam Place in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. And I am the current co-founder and president of the Violently Injured Police Officers Organization. I'm also the president of the New England Concerns of Police Survivors. In my role as the president of COPS, Concerns of Police Survivors, my responsibilities include, but are not limited to, educating police departments on the line of duty death policies, as well as assisting police chiefs in filing for line of duty death benefits through the Public Safety Officers Benefits Program funded by the BJA in Washington, D.C. If a Massachusetts police officer is killed in the line of duty, there are benefits that are afforded to the families, and rightfully so. Allow me, please, to illustrate what the benefits are. There's a one-time federal benefit of $422,035, which is tax-free. That comes directly from PSOB. There's a one-time state benefit of $300,000, signed for by Governor Baker, in this case, coming from the State House. The officer's widow, or whoever the spouse, or parents, or whoever their beneficiary is, would receive 100% of the officer's base salary, and that is based on the rank that they held at the time of their death. And it's not only just 100% of their salary, it includes all the stipends that the contract that's in place lists, and that's for life, okay? The surviving spouse has real estate tax exemption for the town or city in which the officer lives, providing it's their primary residence and they live in Massachusetts. If the officer has children, their children will go to college, state schools, free tuition for any state school in this state. If the children decide to be a police officer, fireman, or any civil service job, those children are eligible to go to the top of the list under a wounded veteran. It's called the 402A status. So those are all the benefits that are afforded to the families of our fallen officers, our heroes. On May 5th, 2017, Braintree had a critical incident. You just heard that from Mr. Murphy. Thankfully, the city did not lose an officer that night, but almost did. Officer Don Delaney. He sustained some serious injuries, not only physical, but psychological. There were also 4 other officers on scene that evening who acted heroically and stopped the threat, thankfully. These officers, no doubt, suffered some trauma. We call it the invisible trauma. It's not easy taking someone's life. As a survivor of a deadly shooting myself, I know all too well what a traumatic incident does to the mind, body, and soul. The mayor of my city offered to retire me at 72%. I looked at him in his face, and I asked him to explain how my shooting was accidental. I was shot 6 times at point-blank range, died 3 times in the hospital, and my mayor had the nerve to try to retire me with accidental disability. And I asked him, how is a shooting event an accident? Please explain to me, sir. And he sat there dumbfounded and had no response. I eventually got the 100% special legislation thank God, and I'm grateful for the city in retrospect. There was some discussion after that, and they came to their senses and did what was right. So I'm very grateful to my city. I am. In closing, my city administration's lack of consideration initially and empathy to my situation turned into administrative betrayal, causing me and my family unneeded emotional and psychological distress. Police officers are guardians of our democracy. They're called upon each day to keep peace in our communities, responding to the calls for service. It's when you need them. They're always there. Now we have an officer who's calling upon his city for help because he's struggling and has been struggling. The question is, how are you going to respond? Do you have his back, just like he's had your back? It is my sincere hope that you all give careful consideration this evening on this matter and vote positively to give Ryan McHugh 100% disability going forward. He deserves it. Thank you all for your time. Merry Christmas to you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oliveira. Okay, next, I would like to invite Chief Du Bois to the podium, please. Good evening, Chief. Thank you for being here tonight.
Good evening. First, I'd just like to recognize Mario. Appreciate him being here. He's got a pretty compelling story, and he's a tireless advocate for critical incidents, and he's very well known throughout the state. I've gone to several of his presentations. As a matter of fact, I went to one that he put on at the State House, trying to get some movement, which never seems to happen. But he's a tireless advocate, and I appreciate him being here. And if you know his story, it's extremely compelling. My position on this issue is apparently very unpopular, and it's not intended to be. I feel very strongly about supporting all the police officers as one of my primary duties, and I feel like I do that daily. But I'm also, in this particular case, I'm looking at all the police officers and the potential future issues that we're going to present to the board here, to the council, and I'm looking forward to those potential requests as well as this one that's before you. So, and because of that, I've been asked to be here. This is a conversation that I had several months ago with my non-support of this request. And I haven't publicly advocated not to pursue it. I just kept my opinions to myself, other than the few people that I've talked to about it. But I've been asked to be here today. And quite honestly, I've asked several people if we could do this in executive session, because I really don't feel like this is the forum for this. I don't think this public setting is appropriate to talk about somebody's personal issues, his history, and all the activities that took place that we're referencing. It's not possible, so I'm going to try and do it as appropriately as I can, but it is a consideration for me, and I really would prefer that it was in a private setting. But that being said, the first obvious, I guess, issue is the difference in the mayor's opinion and my opinion. And the mayor and I have spoke about this several times, and I think the difference ultimately is that the mayor was at the event that night, the incident, and I certainly wasn't. I wasn't employed here then. I'm looking at it from a bigger, broader picture of my law enforcement career and statewide issues that I'm fully aware of. I fully support the mayor's position. It's not something I'm opposed to. I understand where he's coming from, and I think equally he understands where I'm coming from. It's a discussion we've had, but it's not controversial, at least in my view, with him. That being said, I've heard multiple times that a failure to support this is some kind of anti-policing suggestion or position. And that can't be further from the truth. This council has been extremely supportive from my time here and well before. The mayor has been extremely supportive. This community has been tremendous. So the support here for law enforcement is unquestioned. So I really don't believe that any position you take on this issue should be considered anti-policing. I think it's a distraction if that's what somebody presents. And I equally feel like this is not a mental health or an anti-PTSD issue. It's not recognized, it's recognized, and I'll go into what we do internally and what we have done for Officer McHugh. It's not a failure to recognize the severity of mental health or PTSD. This specific issue is completely about circumventing the standard current retirement process and enhancing a pension to the equivalent of what you heard as a line of duty death. And I'm not supportive of that, and I will go into my explanation why. I think it's important to understand what the police department does for mental health and any potential PTSD. So we've been in peer support for over 10 years. We have an officer that's a team leader on the regional support team, and that officer is like extremely busy doing one-on-one debriefings and diffusions and just dealing with any critical incidents. So it's something that we take very seriously. We also have mandatory diffusings of any critical incidents for anybody that was on scene before they leave the shift. And then we do schedule debriefings, within a certain amount of time afterwards for anybody that was involved. And this has been countless times just since I've been here. We do respond to a lot of critical incidents on a regular basis. So these are pretty common practice in the police department. If officers self-identify as needing some kind of assistance, regardless of what it is, we're there to support them. We'll give them time off, we'll schedule counseling, we'll schedule doctors, regardless of what the issue is with them. So we support the officers, I think, as much as possible. We also internally have 3 mental health clinicians that work for us that are grant funded through the state. We're a training hub for the South Shore. So these 3 clinicians, along with family services, several officers, they teach, for instance, a 40-hour crisis intervention tactics course that other police departments, along with ours, go to. They teach a variety of other courses. We also have 100% of our officers trained in mental health first aid. We utilize a private psychologist for return of duty assessments and fitness for duty, which is what you have in your packet for Officer McHugh. So we utilize a doctor that is associated with Boston PD, but he has a private practice, and we have used him multiple times to return officers to service. And it's on their timeline. There's no pressure, whatever the timeline it takes. And there's been multiple occasions, it's several months, if not longer, after a critical incident. The services that Officer McHugh has received, which I think is important to understand our addressing of all his any mental health issues that were identified. So in May of 2017, the town's insurer was Cook & Company. And back then, they didn't recognize what they call non-visible injuries. And they wouldn't consider those as injured on duty claims. Deputy Want, at the time, appealed all their decisions and fought pretty heavily for them to recognize that status, and it ultimately was approved. So this is the first time I'm aware of in the state that the PTSD was recognized as an injured on duty claim, or at least it certainly was for Cook & Company and for the community here. And then Officer McHugh returned to work in October. From May to October, he was out. In February of 2022, Officer McHugh contacted Deputy Want and self-identified that he was having trouble and he needed some help and that he wasn't going to be working anymore. Started going off on his sick time, which is very typical, just the process that we have. And over the course of several weeks, we worked with Cabot Risk, which is our current insurance provider. They only had an 18-month look back on any ongoing claims, so any previous injuries 18 months back. So we worked with them. I argued that it was an open claim from the May incident from 4 years later, earlier. And ultimately, they approved the injured on duty claim for him. So then he was returned back to injured on duty status, which in turn was basically put him on 100% pay since February of this past year. He's been 100% pay, and he's still on that as we speak. He also was offered a bunch of different counseling programs. He was offered a on-site program, like a residential treatment program to work with any of his PTSD issues, which I know he attended, which was all set up through our peer support officer at no cost to the town. And also there's mandatory follow-up sessions, which I believe he's still performing. So again, this isn't about us recognizing PTSD or any mental health issues. This is really an incident that you have to recognize is so extreme that we're going to circumvent the current retirement system process and essentially, I don't know what the value is, but it's drastically changing and enhancing what pretty much everyone else would get as a disability pension. So I guess part of this is you have to understand what PERAC, the Public Employees Retirement System, does and what they provide. Excuse me. So the Public Employees Retirement System is a defined benefit plan based on essentially, and I'm just going to kind of give you a broad view, is its age and years of service. There's a simple chart. You factor the age, you factor the years of service, and it gives you a percentage of your salary. They typically do it's a 3-year average, and that's what you receive. The maximum salaries that police officers receive, firefighters, group 4, and there's multiple groups, would be 80%. It's typically 32 years, age 55. There's a few different ways you can change that a little bit, but that's essentially what it comes down to. An accidental disability pension doesn't factor in age and years of service. It's a defined 72% of what somebody would receive. And I believe it's for 1 year, it's your previous year of service. It's not an average of 3 years or whatever. As Officer McHugh, from February until currently, it was brought to me that over the summer, I don't remember the dates specifically, but he identified that he would not be returning to work. He would not be returning to a police officer as his position. We scheduled a line of duty fitness evaluation, which you have a copy of, and I'm sure you've read it, so you have the results of that. During that time, a retirement application for disability, accidental disability pension was filed by me as what's called an involuntary. And that was because of a whole bunch of different reasons, which I don't really feel like I need to get into, but it's essentially the same exact process. I file it versus the applicant, and then the same process goes forward. So he's currently in that process right now, where the next step is to schedule medical evaluations that they talked about, so from doctors. And what's important to understand here also is that at Officer McHugh's current years of service in age, he's eligible if he just said, I don't want to be a police officer anymore, I'm leaving. He's eligible for 25% of his 3 high years. So the disability pension is going to go to 72% versus the 25% if we didn't have that available, which again is the standard which everybody that would be considered having an accidental disability would receive. With this home rule petition that gets filed statewide, they go through the Public Safety Committee, which is a committee, obviously, in the House of Representatives, the legislature. One of the committee members is a representative. His name's Tim Whalen. He's a longtime friend of mine. I worked for him back in the Worcester County House of Correction a long time ago. He's a retired state trooper, obviously very pro-law enforcement. He's been a state rep for 8 years. And I called him and talked to him because he's on the committee that approves these. And he explained to me that over the 8-year period that he's been on this committee, which they see every home rule petition statewide, they've approved on the average of 1 or 2 per year, which goes in line with what Mario talked about. It was in 2013, and there's been 5 that have been approved since then, including his. And then there's 11 pending from various places, but Boston obviously has the most pending, and the 2 that we currently have filed are in that 11. And Representative Whalen explained to me that these home rule petitions are extremely scrutinized. They're heavily reviewed, and that's what's taking so long. And that's why ours, the first 2 that we filed, are still pending. And there's a lot of scrutiny with these. I guess more interestingly, or however you want to look at it, is in somewhere around 1949, 1950, till currently, there's been 50 of these approved. From the best of my knowledge, I guess that's an approximate number, but I think I'm fairly accurate with that. I've heard that from several different sources. So you're talking 70 years, 50 of them, and it's statewide. So this is a very rare occurrence that these get approved from a statewide level. And also to put this all in perspective, PERAC approves disability pensions, so the accidental disabilities. If you look at their 2021 annual report, they approved 600 accidental disabilities statewide in 2021. So passing this home rule petition would be the equivalent of saying this is the 1 in 600 disabilities that rise to the level that's so exceptional that you would want to treat it as a line of duty death benefit. It's a drastic step, I feel. And that's, these are just the numbers that come off the state website and talking to people about how these home rule petitions work. So, what you're asking for is the typical 72% standard disability versus the 25% that he's been earned, that has been earned to this point in his career, versus what the home rule petition is, which I think is very drastic in an extreme response of 100% pay, annual raises until 65, a return of all the money that was paid into the retirement system, no medical panel, no evaluation of the disability at all, and there's a few other little things that kind of go in with that. It's just from, in my position, a very extreme response to this incident. The lack of support for this from me is also based on some equity with other officers that might be before you for the same incident. Every one of these incidents involved multiple officers, and they all had a different experience at that incident. And as you heard from Officer Murphy, there were 5 people at the motel. So conceivably, there's going to be 5 of those before you. Obviously, that's not the case. One passed away, and Officer Cushing was involved in 2. But so you have multiple people, and if we're talking 1 or 2 a year, we have 3 officers. We have 2 filed already. Officer Cushing would be possibly the 3rd from the June incident, and then several more from this incident. I think it's an extreme response. It's a very rare circumstance that these home rule petitions get filed, And that's part of my evaluation of why I don't support this. There's been a lot of questions that I've had about the distinction between the two incidents. And unfairly, I guess, the council and a lot of people only have those two incidents to compare, where my written explanation, I think, gives you some of that information. But, you know, I'm looking at it from a broader picture in my 30 years of policing. You know, one of the things that you asked me to do as the chief of police in this role is making some tough decisions, essentially. Hiring people, not hiring people, firing people potentially, promoting people, discipline if it's appropriate. And every one of those decisions has a significant impact financially on the people that are involved. Somebody not getting promoted for whatever reason or not getting hired is a very significant decision and an impact on their life for the future, because it goes into their retirement, because it's based on their average 3 years. So making those decisions, they're not just like, I think this is what we're going to do today. We take it very seriously. There's a lot of input from a lot of sources that I feel like I'm privy to, the facts of the operation of the police department, the specifics of the situation, the input from other people, the records that I've read, you know, the history of the personnel. All those things get factored in, and they certainly have been factored into my decision to not support this home rule petition. I don't think it's very fair to go into a point-by-point comparison of the two incidents. They're both serious, but what I can tell you is the severity of the incident from June, it was so extreme with the incident with Kit. It is by far the most significant event that I've experienced and have seen, I would say, in my career of 32 years. That's an exceptional set of circumstances. It's just, in a lot of ways, doesn't compare to anything else. There's also a timeliness impact on this incident. The impacts for the officers in June 2021 were immediate. And like I said, I'm not going to go into the details of it, but the impact was drastic and it was very immediate for those that were involved. Officer McHugh had a significant incident in 2017. He returned to work about 5 months later in October of 2017, and he honestly didn't show any signs of impact up until this past February, 4.5 years later, 4 years later, 4.5, whatever it is. There wasn't any discipline involved. There wasn't work performance issues. And quite honestly, he actually worked a significant amount of overtime. So he was the union president for a period of time also. So I think there is an analysis or part of the factor, and it's certainly not the only thing, but the timeline in the time between when the incident happened and what we're in tonight is something that is included in the analysis. And it's certainly in the analysis for my support of this, or, well, lack of support. I can't tell you, and this is my 32nd year of law enforcement, I've witnessed some very significant incidents, and I've had coworkers involved in some very critical incidents that have been shot. I've known several officers that have been killed in the line of duty, and I've known a lot of officers, I would say a fair number, that have been injured that have had to retire from their injuries. And every one of those people have received the 72, the standard disability pension. And I don't know anybody in my career that has received the home rule petition other than Mario, actually, is the only one that I know of. I know there's other ones because there's 5 that have passed. I know the names. I didn't personally know them. But if you're looking at 600 disability, accidental disability applications or pensions approved in 1 year, since 2013 when Mario's went through, roughly 10 years later, you're talking say 5,000 conservatively, 4,000 or 5,000 disability pensions approved, then we have 5 of these home rule petitions. And I think that's appropriate. There are very extreme, rare circumstances where when you take it to the next level and you give somebody the line of duty death benefits. And truthfully, my opinion of this has not changed. I haven't shared it with anybody. It was between Officer McHugh and I several times. Obviously, he didn't like my response, and that's totally, I understand that, but I'm here because I don't support it, and I feel like I've been asked to explain my rationale, and I sincerely don't think that this one particular incident is the 1 in 600 that happened in 2021 that would elevate it to this level. So for that reason, I don't support it, and I'm going to ask you not to support it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, at this time, I would offer up to my colleagues on the council comments or questions, and a reminder, we'll have everybody allowed to ask or speak once, and then we can go around the horn a second time if people have follow-ups. So with that, is there anybody who has questions or comments? Councilor Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam President. I really don't know where to start with that last speaker's commentary and assessment and comparisons. So, I am going to start with a written response that I had submitted to the council. When we received late yesterday afternoon this letter from the chief, I read it and felt it needed an immediate response. I'd like to read this. I'm writing to you this to respond to a letter that Chief of Police Du Bois had written December 19, 2022, opposing Officer Ryan McHugh's home rule petition. I'm sorry to address these issues at the last minute, but the chief only gave his letter to Officer McHugh last evening. My first point is misstatements about the disability retirement process. The chief writes, most important is to understand that Officer McHugh is currently seeking approval for an accidental disability retirement. This statement is not accurate. Although Officer McHugh originally planned to submit an application for accidental disability retirement out of desperation because of the chief refused to support a home rule petition, he opted not to when the mayor agreed to submit the home rule petition. And thank you, Mayor. The chief filed an involuntary application. The key word, involuntary application. For accidental disability retirement, even though he knew a home rule petition was being filed. I appreciate the opinions and the experience of Chief Du Bois. Officer McHugh did not oppose it because technically it's valid, and to oppose it would waste the Retirement Board's resources, something Officer McHugh would not do even though it would have benefited him. Now he is being forced to go through the PERIC accidental disability retirement process, and he will have to be examined by 3 PERIC doctors and relive his trauma 3 more times. This on the heels of also, in his packet to the council, his evaluation and assessments by psychological, doctor of psychology, and professional mental health, certified professional mental health professionals. Officer McHugh did not oppose it because it is technically valid, and to oppose it would waste the Retirement Board's resources. Now he is being forced to go through PERIC accidental disability retirement process. I wanted to repeat that. He's to be examined by 3 PERIC doctors and relive his trauma 3 more times. It is important to understand that Officer McHugh is not asking to receive both a 72% and a 100% pension. If he is approved for this accidental disability pension, and then the home rule petition is approved, his 72% pension will be increased to 100%. He will be treated just as Officers Donahue and Siebert will be treated when they got their 100% pensions, which I'll have more questions for the chief after others have had the opportunity, which the police supports. He will not have a 172% pension. I feel this is an arbitrary treatment of Officer McHugh. The chief states he does not believe Officer McHugh deserves a 100% pension because he was not involved in a critical incident that was exceptionally and extraordinarily violent, like the 2021 shooting of which the chief did support the home rule petitions. I do not understand how the May 5th, 2017 Motel 6 shooting could be considered less violent than the June 4th, 2021 shooting. On May 5th, 2017, a violent felon shot Officer Donnie Delaney in the face right in front of his four fellow officers. Thankfully, Officer Delaney survived, but those officers will never be the same. One has since died from cirrhosis. Essentially, God bless his soul, he drank himself to death, effectively taking his own life by self-medicating with alcohol because he could not live with the memories of that shooting. Officer McHugh's involvement in May 5th, 2017 shooting was identical to Officer Richard Siebert's involvement in the June 4th, 2021 shooting. Officer Siebert was forced to shoot the person who had shot Officers Cushing and Donahue, who had killed K-9 Kit. Officer McHugh was forced to shoot the felon in the hotel room who had shot Officer Delaney, and who continued to shoot at Officer McHugh and the three other officers through the door. Both Officer Siebert and Officer McHugh have to live with the knowledge they have ended the life of someone who is seriously mentally ill. And both of them have to live with the memory of knowing that it was kill or be killed. The Chief of Police chose to support Officer Siebert's home rule petition, but actively opposes Officer McHugh's. There is no reasonable basis to distinguish between these two situations, and I am at a loss to understand this arbitrary decision. Finally, I take issue with the Chief's characterization of the post-traumatic stress as a non-visible injury, which suggests that it is not as serious as a visible injury. Anyone close to someone injured by post-traumatic stress can see the terrible damage it does to those who suffer from it. There is no set pattern in how PTSD manifests itself over a 5-year period or an immediate period. Anyone close to someone injured by post-traumatic stress can see the terrible damage it does to those who suffer from it. Suicide is visible. Panic attacks are visible. Exhaustion is visible. Self-medication with alcohol is visible. Self-isolation is visible. Hypervigilantism is visible. Severe depression and irritability are visible. Even those who choose not to notice this kind of suffering can tell when a dedicated public safety employee is so traumatized that he can no longer perform his duties. Officer Siebert, who became disabled from PTSD because of the June 4th, 2021 shooting, deserves a 100% pension, as much as Officer Donahue, who was shot that day. Officer McHugh deserves it for the same reason. I will yield back to the chair, but I will be asking and pointing out what I think are viable solutions that this council can take or investigate for the financial challenges that we are all dealing with these terrible shootings and their aftermath. Thank you, Madam
Councilor
President.
Arnold. Any other councilor wish to speak on this matter this time? Councilor Hume?
Thank you, Madam President. A couple questions, if I may. Please. And points of clarification. So originally, when this was brought up, didn't come to us, it was presented to the mayor and police chief. I don't know if either, and both said they would not support this. Is that correct? Well, the chief has already said he won't support it, but my understanding is originally the mayor was not supportive of this.
Through the chair.
Please,
President.
go right ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Initially, the conversation was that I would support it if the chief supported it, and that was the original conversation.
So he's not supporting it, and you're supporting it.
Understood.
What's,
What occurred after that conversation was there were additional conversations, one with the counselor, some more information, and another conversation with Officer McHugh. And at that point, I made the decision to present it to the council.
okay, thank you. So this is originating from your office, correct?
It comes from me,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. This isn't an easy decision for any of us. The council's responsibility, and all of our responsibility, we're the legislative side of government. We do not get involved in the day-to-day operations of the town. We don't get involved in the day-to-day employee issues. We don't know those issues. I myself, I'll speak for me, I rely on department heads and all the decisions that we make, regardless of what the topic is, for their subject matter expertise. Them being the department heads, they've been put in these positions because they are the subject matter experts. They're trusted, they're knowledgeable, and they know better than anybody how to run the department, how their employees are performing in their duties. With each of the home rule petitions that we received, to my knowledge, we've never received any statements from healthcare providers, medical providers, whatnot. We've received that with Officer McHugh, and now that's public record. So normally we wouldn't speak on this, as the chief said he wouldn't speak on it, but within it, there's documentation that one of the health providers says he can't return to work for at least 6 to 12 months. It doesn't say that he can't return to work. It says he can't return for 6 to 12 months. As I said, this isn't an easy decision for any of us. We could all approve this and just let it go up to the State House, and as the chief said, it could sit there for years and never get approved or whatnot. But we're here to do our job. The residents of the town put us here to make decisions and take votes on things that are put before us, so I'm going to do that. I've always supported the police. I will continue to support the police. I have a great amount of respect for Chief DuBois. I value his opinion, I trust his opinion, and I respect it greatly. Because his opinion is not here and his support is lacking, I will not be supporting this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hume. Councilor Ringus, and then I'll go to Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you to Officer McHugh and his family for being here tonight. Thank you as well to the police officers, first responders, and other residents who have taken time to be here tonight. I'll just state at the outset, sort of cutting to the chase, I will support the measure tonight. I understand the concerns that have been expressed by some here tonight as to the financial implications of such a measure. And this does underscore the need to perhaps look in the future at ways to mitigate or rectify this, and or possibly to work towards addressing this process at the state level. But tonight, that's not something we can accomplish. And furthermore, I have a great deal of respect for Chief DuBois for his leadership and stewardship of the Braintree Police and the years of high-level experience that he brings to his position. With that said, I have known Officer McHugh since we attended elementary school together just across the street at St. Francis. In knowing Ryan, I also got to know his father, who at that time was the Officer McHugh. And even as young kids, it was clear of the respect and admiration that Ryan held for his dad, as well as police officers as a whole. It was during this time period that we were in elementary school that Braintree lost 2 officers in the line of duty, Lieutenant Principe and Sergeant DeCross. And I remember at that time Ryan volunteering to be a part of what was a widely attended funeral at St. Francis as an altar server. The wave of blue that showed up to line the streets of Braintree wasn't something that I think was lost on him, nor on me. And given all of this, I don't think anyone was overly surprised when in 2005, Ryan followed in his father's footsteps and joined the Braintree Police Department, where he has been a dedicated public servant since. I know that this decision is a difficult one for Ryan, as much as Ryan was called to serve in a very important position in protecting and serving his community, he also has a much more important position, and that's as a father. His children have shared their father with this town for the entirety of their lives. And it's now time for Ryan to heal, to focus on being a dad and a husband. I'm struck by some of the words that we heard here tonight by MCOP Vice President Kenneth Murphy, as well as those of retired Detective Oliveira. I note the support of Mayor Kokoros. This body has a letter of support from the Braintree Police Officers Association, which has, I think, a very important quote noting that the Commonwealth has not devised an adequate system nor enacted appropriate law associated with this type of injury, despite numerous reasonable arguments and efforts which validate taking action that formalizes the remedies proposed in this home rule petition. As a result, communities like the town of Braintree must consider the weight of supporting their employees who endure extraordinary circumstances through sound leadership and decisive action versus subjecting such employees to a proven inferior process. I'm also struck, and I think Councillor Hume noted that due to the nature of this, we do have some sort of what I would call medical type letters within the public record now, and the documents that we received specifically from a Dr. Brown and a licensed mental health counselor, Amy Donovan Matthews. Dr. Brown does assess Ryan as having PTSD. No one that sits here tonight, myself included, is a medical professional, and as such, I have to hang my hat on that. Dr. Brown states PTSD in P.O. McHugh precludes his capacity to return to duty as a police officer for the town of Braintree. He does note later down in the letter that it was for at least 6 to 12 months. I would also note the letter from licensed mental health counselor Amy Donovan Matthews, who offers the clinical opinion that Officer McHugh meets the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. Furthermore, she states, it is the opinion of this practice that Officer McHugh is no longer mentally and emotionally able to function and perform his job duties as a sworn police officer. I think Chief DuBois noted it would be inappropriate to compare two sort of events, that being the June event where this town lost K-9 Kit and almost lost some other officers, and to compare that with May of 2017 where we also almost lost an officer. It's clear to me that the medical professionals here have put forward this diagnosis of PTSD, precluding Ryan's ability to function as a police officer, and it is time for him to heal. Again, there is work to be done in rectifying the financial implications that this puts towns in, and so it's an understandable concern that is being sort of put forward. But tonight, I feel it's incumbent for us to support Ryan, to support his family for his service to this town, and so I will be supporting this measure. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ringus. Councillor Flaherty?
Thank you. What we're tasked with tonight is not to ascertain the merit of Officer McHugh's record on the Braintree Police Force, because his record has been demonstrated to us in no uncertain terms tonight, and it is strong. We are also not here to determine whether he has taken injury in the line of duty, because he has a professional medical diagnosis agreeing that he does, which I see no reason to question. And we are also not here to determine whether it is incumbent upon us to take care of our officers who have sustained such grievous injury in the line of duty that they are no longer able to continue serving on the force at all, because clearly we must. And there's more than one avenue available for us to be able to do so. In Braintree, the standard means in place for taking care of any member of our public safety personnel after they've sustained an injury too severe for them to be able to return to work is to award the individual with an accidental disability retirement. Until now, this award has been judged to be an appropriate and fair means given to give injured public safety officials the support they need and the financial security they deserve to be able to heal as much as they can and lead vibrant lives in our community. Tonight, we're considering another option, which is whether to support this home rule petition. A petition of this nature is equivalent to a line of duty death benefit, but in Braintree, we have supported the extension of the same benefit to officers who've sustained career-ending mental or physical injury in exceptionally violent circumstances. It's this concept of exceptionalism that makes the question tonight so difficult to resolve because it requires a subjective judgment call. Which events are exceptional? Which police acts in any given event are exceptional? Whose judgment should we rely on to guide us on this? I think the person we rely on for this is Chief Du Bois, who brings 30 years of law enforcement experience to the table. He came to Braintree with an outstanding reputation and has demonstrated sound leadership in the department in both large-scale critical events and in routine police business. Chief Du Bois has a clear grasp of the complexities surrounding public safety issues broadly and an intimate and compassionate understanding of his own department. I think the council's role here is to serve as a fail-safe against any chief who might demonstrate bias or whose judgment is otherwise clouded. This is not the case here. I have full faith and confidence in Chief Du Bois. I don't think this has been an easy call for him to make, but sometimes leadership means doing the very hardest thing. And so I'm going to support him tonight, and I will not be supporting this home rule petition.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Mackin?
Thank you, Madam President.
Yep.
Thank you for everyone who spoke tonight. And I am going to agree with something the Chief said. I think going forward, we should be doing these behind closed doors. We're being asked to talk about an individual and their family's future when they're sitting right here. And I didn't really think of that with the other two as they weren't present. But, I think going forward, that's something we should think of. Anyway, that being said, I had a gut reaction, when I first got this and saw it, and probably had something to do with it was our third request for this year, and didn't know that much about them, so I did some research on my own, and I don't think the town of Braintree's ever had one any prior to that, and looking at the towns surrounding us, Quincy, Randolph, and Weymouth, I found one in Weymouth, which involved the murder of Officer Michael Chestnut. The chief mentioned that there's currently 11 pending at the State House right now, 2 of which are from Braintree. If we put a third forward, that's 25% of the entire state just coming from Braintree. There's 1 or 2 more that I would fully expect to see. And the question is, how extraordinary are these if they're getting approved fairly frequently? And that's not to minimize anything that happened in May, and that's not to minimize Officer McHugh's service to the town, but I've wrestled with this a lot the past 2 weeks, and I think it sets a precedent going forward, which is kind of what I just mentioned as well, is what is the threshold. I think a lot of officers in this room, we've had extraordinary incidents in this town. I think we've been unlucky in that way. But I think, I think 3 in a year is excessive. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Councilor Mackin. Councilor Ryan?
Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank Officer Ryan McHugh for his service to the town. This is a very tough decision. I've been on the town council for a very long time, and this is one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to make. I voted in support of the 2 previous home rule petitions because they were supported by the police chief. This is not supported by the police chief. I feel like he is the subject matter expert on this. I am concerned about the impact that these have on our retirement system, and if the retirement system can support it, I think that it's a very tough decision, but I'm not going to be supporting this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Ryan. Councilor Maglio, did you have comments? If not, that's fine, whatever. Just want to make sure everyone gets a chance. You're good, okay. Anyone for the second time? Councilor Reynolds? Councilor Reynolds, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to ask a couple of questions of some of the previous speakers. I'd first like to ask Chief Du Bois to step up to the podium.
Thank you, Chief.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chief, my first question is, in your letter, you had stated that You have spoken to many people.
Correct.
You've also relied on your 30 years of experience, and thank you for that. Do you have any medical experience?
No.
Okay. Do you have any psychological assessment experience?
Nope.
Okay. And were you able to provide any kind of material assessment from any of these sources that you spoke to, that you shared with us this evening,
Regarding what?
regarding PTSD in the case of Officer McHugh?
No, I did not share medical records with anybody to get
Oh.
their opinion.
Okay. And generally speaking, without naming the individual, was there, I mean, I'm having a difficult time, Chief, comparing, statements. I know one of the previous counselors spoke about that this person could return to work, but there are other aspects in that letter from Dr. Brown that stated that he would not be someone who could function in that role going forward. I can find the direct quote.
I don't dispute that. This is not a PTSD issue. This is not a lack of understanding of mental health.
Okay.
I've never said that. I've actually said the opposite.
Okay.
I fully supported him. We support a lot of officers that are having mental health concerns or issues or, resulting from trauma.
Okay, thank you. As part of Officer Siebert's request, was that PTSD related?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And your assessments on that, did you use the same set of criteria as it was on Officer McHugh?
Not sure what you mean.
What I mean is that you seem to, well, I'm going to quote what you had said earlier.
Okay.
That,
Counselor, your question, please.
say again?
Your question for the chief.
My question for the chief is, can you tell us what is the difference between Officer McHugh and Officer Siebert's assessment in your mind, where both of them were involved in a shooting, a deadly shooting, both of them killed an assailant, both of them suffered trauma from it, although from different periods of time in their manifestation of their disease or of their impairment? Can you tell us what is the determining factor between those two decisions where you've come down one way versus another?
Yeah, what I can tell you is that I was on scene on the June 4th incident. I was pretty involved, along with a whole bunch of other people, at the immediate aftermath of that.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a firsthand understanding of exactly what took place there.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, without question in my mind, it's the most extreme incident that I've been involved with and I'm aware of.
That you
And the only other
personally, yeah.
comparison that I can give you is a friend of mine was with Dick Donahue when he was shot during the marathon bombings. That's an equivalent scenario in my mind. I'm not going to go back and forth and compare
But I'm going to
both
ask about
incidents.
these questions
Counselor,
that
Counselor.
you dealt with.
I'm
Don't
not going
interrupt, please.
to, I don't think it's appropriate for me to compare the two. They're drastically different, and I can tell you in my career as a police officer in 32 years, one which was recognized nationally as one of the most 10 significant incidents of the year was a very extreme, incredible incident. The other one wasn't to that standard in my mind. Just wasn't.
Because it didn't get the national press.
No, that's
Counselor.
not what I said.
It's a
Counselor,
question.
that's-
Please, Madam
state-
President.
State your
The
question.
chief had a very long
Counselor,
time to
you're out of
speak. I've
order.
got questions
Please
to
state your
ask.
question to the chief.
Okay, Chief. So you said you don't have any particular assessments that help guide you on your decision. Have you had any problems with Officer McHugh outside and his roles for you in the past that you think might bring a little bit of bias in your opinion?
Counselor,
Madam President,
out
I'm
of
asking a
order
question
about
per
a
Robert's
personal-
rules. It is appropriately to discern his relationship here.
Counselor, we're not going to get into people's personal medical records. We have medical records that are in the public record, and that is what is deemed in bounds for this evening's hearing. If you have another question for the
I do.
chief,
Thank you, Madam President.
please state
I do
it.
have another question.
is appropriate. It does seem like it's getting a little hostile, and I don't want the line of questioning to get hostile.
Thank you, Councilor.
But with that said, someone brought up, and I don't know if it, and I can't remember if it was yourself or if it was Councilor Ryan or if it was Councilor Hume, someone brought up the perspective of bias. So I think once that door has been opened, I think it is a line of questioning that could be explored. I don't remember who said it. I do know someone said the bias. So I do think that door has been opened for questioning, although it would be more appropriate avenue of people could tone things down a bit. But the door has been opened, and I think it would be Robert's Rules of Order to, on a very fine line, be careful, try to go personnel records.
Within the bounds of what is in the public record, Councilor, if you have a question.
Thank you, Madam President. Chief, do you group PTSD injuries in with accidental disability?
Do I group them in?
Yes.
Not sure what you mean exactly. I mean, if they're recognized through the retirement board, I mean, I don't claim to be, and I'm not an expert at all. I'm not well-versed on PTSD. So if they're recognized through the disability pension system, I mean, that's beyond my
Okay.
knowledge.
Can I ask you in a different way?
Sure.
A firefight, violent action of your police officers, and they are hurt. Is that considered an accident?
I would not consider that it's a deliberate act. It's considered an accidental disability.
The question is, on the actual incident itself, do you consider a shooting of an officer or a violently injured officer performing their duty who has been disabled is an accident for purposes of accidental disability?
Yes.
Okay. And what is the difference in your mind between an accident versus an assault?
I'm not going to answer that. This is, I don't think it's appropriate, and it's got no relevance to what's going on. My opinion of an accidental disability is not really relevant. It's the retirement board, as far as I'm concerned. They were assaulted. There's no question about it. That's a deliberate action. There's not an option in the disability retirement pension system for a deliberate assault.
Okay, and you've mentioned the retirement system going back 50 years. And do you think in 50 years there's been enough information accumulated regarding police activities and police incidences and the types of injuries and how those injuries are categorized? Do you think that there's been a medical change and an opinion has changed over the last 50 years on any matter that I just mentioned? The likelihood of it?
I'm sure there has, but as I already stated, I'm not a medical expert, so, I mean, I'm sure there's been improvements in the knowledge of accidents and injuries and how it's, how are they categorized.
Very good. I have one more question. And this question I would like to bring up Kenny Murphy, please. Previous speaker.
Mr. Murphy, you may come to the podium. Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Based on some of the statements that we read in the medical reports, I just want to quote one. It's the opinion of the practice that Officer McHugh is no longer mentally and emotionally able to function and perform his job duties as a sworn police officer. That's from Amy Matthews. There is also Andrew Brown stating that Police Officer McHugh presently manifests impairment attributed to psychiatric disorder to an extent that renders him incapable of resuming his duties as a police officer for the town of Braintree. So, I want to ask you, Officer Murphy, about line of duty injuries, and how PERIC generally will interact with a home rule petition.
There's several ways that that happens. In Weymouth, for instance, we circumvented the retirement board in the local community, and we didn't even file through them. We filed directly through the city council. We filed to the State House, and the officer was exempted from the medical review panel. PERAC, there was a brief delay, and there is currently a delay. It's been brought up with respect to the pending bills. Right now, there is some discourse or some debate at the State House with respect to the medical panel. They haven't caught up in terms of verbiage and processing of this with PTSD. As the chief himself says, he's not an expert on it, limited information on it. We're basing our decisions tonight on that, though. But the state has not caught up with their retirement processing of this. And so there's some debate on how to exempt officers from PERAC guidelines. We did it in the case of the Weymouth officer through the Vice President John Nelson, who is the state legislative liaison officer of MassCop, working there at the State House every day, and we were able to pass the bill. That's been my experience with respect to PERAC, that there's question as to how to avoid this. It's possible, it's feasible, and frankly, that's one of the major points of this, is to avoid subjecting the officer, as the chief has said. He's now on to the doctor phase. He's now on to the phase of having to go and relive this with 3 other doctors, then a panel. That's one of the primary reasons for this.
Right, and how does PERIC work in terms of, with a retirement board, to determine, what's their role to determine a disability finding for a police officer?
Sure. So the initial application gets submitted to the local community retirement board. From there, it either gets approved or not. With respect to moving on in the process, it then goes to the state level. The officer has the option of 3-doctor panel. They then attend the 3-doctor panel. There is a finding produced, and then comes back to the local retirement board with an attorney representing the state, essentially, and it is debated over if that's the case. There's no guarantee, just so you know, there's no guarantee that Officer McHugh gets 72%. He could get 50% out of the process that the chief has filed. The state representative or the state attorney could come down and argue against it. I, in fact, processed one individual who had a heart attack. That's part of the heart bill. It was some significant debate as to whether, it's a per se injury, it was significant debate as to whether or not he got 72% or 50%. And it took several processes and steps, and he ultimately was able to achieve it. But there's no guarantee that Ryan McHugh will get 72%.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
So
Counselor,
I'm still asking questions.
And then
He came up and gave his written statement, so I think
And
we already heard
I think
from
I
him.
have the ability to ask questions of statements that were made.
You're
I'm gonna
asking a
turn-
lot of statements, Counsel Reynolds, so.
Well,
I'm going to turn
I
to
think that there's-
Counselor Maglio, who hasn't had a chance to speak yet. So for the moment, Mr. Murphy, you're good. Thank you. Please don't leave.
Thank you.
Counselor Maglio.
Thank you. So this is a lot tonight. It is a lot. What has gone through my mind throughout this process, which feels very truncated to me, but I'm sure has seemed extremely long to Officer McHugh and his family, is what I keep coming back to is about fairness and equity. And I think about being fair to Officer McHugh and his family. I think about being fair to the other officers. we then start hearing about the price tag of this fairness, and I think we also have to be fair to residents. Ultimately, I don't think it is responsible for us to choose to not do something because of how often it happens or how rare it happens. And for me, what keeps coming up, and Chief Du Bois, you were extremely compelling, and I really appreciate the information that you gave, and also Officer Murphy, who was just up, but the fact is it comes down to incapacitation, and I'm actually a social worker. I actually do have some clinical experience, but I have absolutely no business determining whether Officer McHugh is incapacitated or not. We have his medical information. This seems like a fully invasive process. And I'm thinking, who would put themselves through this? Talk about being re-traumatizing. This is pretty, I would imagine this is pretty triggering for everybody here. So where do I come down on this? It's been said that there's work to be done, and there is, and it needs to happen. But I don't think it should happen based on an individual case that's before us to reject his case and then come up with the process. I think that we should I think that I am going to support his case and then also insist that we have a process for this that we can.
Please let the counselor finish.
That we can afford, that is not as invasive, that doesn't pit, that doesn't pit chief against mayor. We have the chief executive officer saying, evidently saying we can pay for this. We have the chief distinguishing some of the differences in a way that he was here for one of those incidents and not here for the other. And I don't think that means that he didn't give this his full consideration. I believe that he did. But in the scheme of things, to me, it comes down to, I don't know the difference between why Officer Seibert would, and other officers. It's not even about who it was. I feel that in my role and to best represent the people that I'm trying to be a voice for, isn't to be a therapist or a doctor or a physician. One of the things that the chief said is that this is something that the Public Safety Committee of the legislature does, and they go through absolute scrutiny, and they're the ones that are looking at all of these cases across the board and making decisions. And to me, that sounds like, well, then they are the experts. They're the Public Safety Committee. And so I would be comfortable with their full examination of this. So those are my thoughts. That's where I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Maglio. Go to Councilor Ryan and then Councilor Rengus. For the second time. Yep.
And I just want to follow sort of that train of thought that Councilor Maglio took us down, because I think it's an important one for all of the councilors here, and I would implore you to reconsider some of the statements you've already made. I don't think Chief Du Bois is in any way characterizing that Officer McHugh is not suffering from PTSD. I think what his position reflects is, to some degree, the financial implications. It also reflects the idea of what the future might hold for other officers sort of involved within these proceedings. So I understand the position, and I don't draw negative inferences from his position. But as we sort of talked about here, if we put that PTSD piece aside, if we all acknowledge that we are not medical professionals, that 2 medical professionals have diagnosed Ryan with PTSD and the inability, whether it be forever or for at least a degree of time, to not return to work, then we're looking at the financial implications, and we've said we don't want to put them forward to be denied. Well, why not? If it's our body's decision to sort of put something forward to the state, if the state, through their process, decides that they're not going to approve it, well, that's their decision. But I think here tonight, we have the ability to support an officer who's asking for that support, to put this forward, to at least have that consideration taken. As we've said through these stats, it's very rare, so perhaps at the state level, it doesn't get approved. But here tonight, I think based on everything we've heard, it's incumbent upon us to support Officer McHugh and at least put it forward and have that effort. And as Councilman Maglio said, and I said earlier in my remarks, it is clear that at the state level, this process is flawed, and we need to work from the town level to see what we can do, and working with, hopefully the mayor's office to see what is a better way, because this process really is a terrible one. It's terrible that Officer McHugh has to sit through this debate. It's terrible that Chief Dubois has to make comments like this. It's terrible that counselors have to support police, but also sort of put this sort of financial implication. So I think the whole process is flawed and it needs to be rectified. But for tonight, we can't do that. We can't change the process tonight. And I think it's unfair to put that on Officer McHugh. I think it would be important for us to say that we're going to stand with Officer McHugh to put this forward and then take those steps in the aftermath to see what we can do to address that. Our body is basically the budgetary and legislative body of the town. So every May when we have annual town meeting and Ways and Means considers various budgets, we do appreciate the input that we get from Chief Dubois on his budget, on Chief O'Brien on his budget, and on various other department heads on their budgets. And ultimately we hear from our chief executive in Mayor Kokoros and his staff on what this town can afford and can't afford, but ultimately we have some decision-making in approving that budget or not approving that budget, in making sort of deletions from that budget. So that's well within our purview. It's something we do every year. It's something we address on almost every single meeting. So I would ask my fellow councilors to reconsider some of the opinions they put forward and to support Officer McHugh tonight.
Thank you, Councilor Ringus. I'd like to say a few words as well, and I thank my colleagues for the robust debate, and certainly, as Councilor Hume mentioned, this has been, and all of us here, I think, would agree, this has been a very challenging evening, and also just the subject matter before us, and really grappling with this over the last several weeks. Is really what it has felt like. And as to echo Councilor Hume, we are sitting here in seats to sometimes take really tough votes, whether you're voting yes tonight or no tonight. None of us feel like this is an easy vote, I think it is fair to say. However, for me, the chief unequivocally stated he does not support this, and I am in no position to substitute my judgment for that of the chief of police, whose decades of service as an active military officer and law enforcement agent make him the unequivocal expert in this area. And I believe this is the type of decision on which the chief is entitled to deference, due to his years of experience coupled with a sterling reputation and sound judgment. So I fully support the chief of police and his leadership team, and I will not be supporting the motion this evening. Councilor Ryan?
I'd like to make the motion that the town council vote to authorize the mayor to petition the general court for an act providing for the retirement of Ryan McHugh, a police officer in the city known as the town of Braintree, as set forth in the petition for special legislation filed with the town council on or about December 5th, 2022, and on file with the office of the town clerk. Further, that the general court be authorized to make clerical or editorial changes of form only to the bill prior to enactment by the general court, and further, that the mayor be authorized to approve amendments that shall be within the scope of general public objectives of this petition. So moved.
A second for discussion, just to explain the vote. If you're voting yes, you're supporting the home rule petition. If you're voting no, you're voting against the home rule petition.
We have a motion made by Counselor Ryan, a second by Counselor Hume. Clerk Semino, roll call vote, please.
Counselor Barrica?
No.
Counselor Flaherty?
No.
Counselor Hume?
No.
Counselor Mackin?
Abstain.
Counselor Maglio?
Yes.
Counselor O'Brien?
No.
Counselor Reynolds?
Yes.
Counselor Ringus?
Yes.
Counselor Ryan?
No.
We have 5, I apologize, we have 3 in favor, 5 opposed,
The motion fails.
1 abstain.
1 abstain. Thank you very much. We will have no new business this evening. The next meeting of the Town Council will be on Tuesday, January 3rd, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. We will see you in 2023, and I do want to make sure to say thank you to BCAM, Wes Ray, Bill Needham, Jerry Comack, their entire crew for televising and live streaming our meetings this evening. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Councilors Ryan and Hume. Clerk Semino, roll call to adjourn.
Counselor Barrica?
Yes.
Counselor Flaherty?
Yes.
Counselor Hume?
Aye.
Counselor Mackin? Counselor Maglio?
Aye.
Counselor O'Brien?
Aye.
Counselor Reynolds? Counselor Ringus? Counselor Ryan? All in favor to adjourn.
This meeting is adjourned.